What's the fastest way you've seen a CEO ruin a company? Story one: a construction company near me was pulling 100 to $200 million in revenue every year and growing constantly. Then the owner died, and his frat bro Faison was handed the reins. Within a month, a quarter of the employees had either been fired or quit. After 4 months, the rental companies were showing up and repoing lifts and cranes or carry decks in the middle of the day because they weren't being paid. Almost three-fourths of the employees had quit by this point because paychecks kept bouncing. Before 6 months had passed, what was left was sold for a pittance to another company that just wanted what was left of the maintenance contracts. So, like 6 months to bomb the company he'd been groomed to take over since he was a teenager to rubble and piss on the ashes. Story two: took a job at a tech startup in the 90s with the promise of fast growth and opportunity. Things really took off in the second year, and we opened up several more branches in different states while I was promoted to production manager. The company hired a young CEO who was only a couple of years older than me. Sometimes he would stay at our location for a couple of weeks at a time, and he started driving really nice sports cars to work. When he would leave for other cities, he would leave his cars in the parking lot of our branch. There were Corvettes, Porsches, Audis, and more. After the second year of promising growth, the business suddenly stopped while the owners visited and yelled at the entire crew for not managing our money and told us that they were in debt by over $1 million. We were all given the task of dismantling the equipment and preparing it to be sold and shipped before being let go. On our last day when the building was empty, we all noticed that the row of sports cars was still there, and the owner had placed for sale signs on them. It turned out that they were all bought as company vehicles, and the CEO had done this at each business location. We all still were yelled at in a furious rage by the CEO and owner for not being responsible people. Story three: Randall Stevenson, a tant. He bought DirecTV and Warner Brothers, including DC Comics, CNN, HBO, and so on, for only $175 billion between 2015 and 2018. When everyone was moving to stream services, he thought it was a good idea to buy a cable company that was losing customers by millions and a struggling media company. Me and thousands of people lost their jobs because of it, including Randall, with a $64 million retirement package. What kills me about this is that he and a tant were positioned to bundle everything together for customers at an inexpensive rate. Once they went dishless with DirecTV, they could have dominated the market by making it super affordable. And yet, every year, they raised prices to make up for the loss of customers, which in turn made more people cancel. The worst part was, while they were actively destroying DirecTV, Warner Bros., and HBO, they just ignored the entire cell phone division and let a tant become a shell of a respected company. Story four: he tried to run a non-profit library wholesaler like a car dealership, because he was a car dealership guy who knew nothing at all about libraries. Most of the senior staff retired, and he fired the rest, then implemented policies that treated us all like children, such as having to put our phones in a box at the front office when we got into work in the morning. Hired a bunch of rando high-level positions who also knew all about libraries. Then he talked some crap about people who couldn't handle change because they'd quit. Refused to allow us to order inventory so libraries couldn't get extra copies when a book unexpectedly blew up. Anyway, I quit when I was handed a coworker's entire job with no extra compensation or, choice in the matter. And the 60-plus-year-old company was dead within about a year, year and a half of him becoming CEO. Story five: Michael Lyon, CEO and owner of Lyon Real Estate in Sacramento. It was his father's company, but he was able to really expand the company and the brand. They were an anomaly in the real estate world, in that they were a family-owned company, but dominated the Sacramento region. Until his divorce from his wife, where she went public, and to the FBI, with the videos Michael has been surreptitiously recording of their guests in the bedroom and bathroom. That was pretty darn bad. But when cops went in to make the bust, they found him secretly recording himself with an easy girl. And then the meth came onto his scene. It was amazing to see this man's downfall in real time. Story six: Go Bear in Asia. The company got funded 200 million euros in 5 years. Best funded company in SC Asia at the time. Got a new CEO who fired every single board member of the executive team that didn't agree with him. Kept all the yes sir C-level and directors. In 2 years, the company went down the drain and closed. At its peak, it had over 200 employees. The best part of it, he made the company buy a money lending business in the Philippines that he owned. So he pocketed whatever money the company had left and then shut it down. Story 7, David Zaslav and Discovery Channel buying Warner Media. Canceled highly anticipated movies already made, watered down HBO Max with cheap Discovery trash, and instituted RTO and fired anyone who couldn't. He also called The Flash the greatest superhero movie he had ever seen, and put a ton of PR and capital, despite Ezra Miller's previous international crime spree and numerous scandals. He even pulled Westworld completely from HBO Max, after canceling it abruptly even though it had previously been renewed, to put it on Tubi. More recently, he's so profit-hungry and wants to rush every piece of IP they have. He abruptly cut off a couple of episodes from the most recent season of House of the Dragon, right as they were going into production. It left the finale in a really terrible spot, because there is no payoff to what the writers were building on earlier in the season. And next season for House of the Dragon, which the next part of the book, the source material is drawn from, is full of very expensive set pieces. The writers pushed some stuff the last season, and now a lot of it is going to have to go into S3 to pace properly. The problem is that instead of giving his most expensive TV IP freedom to do as many episodes as needed, he's only giving them 8. I genuinely have no idea how they'll pull it off given the corner they've written themselves into and with his cost-cutting constraints. I hate that guy. He's ruined so much about Warner Brothers, and he cannot be fired and banished from the entertainment industry soon enough. Story 8. It's called the Osborne effect. Once the owner of a hugely successful computer company, Adam Osborne announced a new computer before it could be shipped. According to proponents of the Osborne effect theory, Adam Osborne damaged his company's current sales when he began showing the Osborne executive to journalists in early 1983. Dealers rapidly started canceling orders for the Osborne one in anticipation of the new executive. Unsold inventory piled up, and in spite of dramatic price cuts, the Osborne one was selling for $1,295 in July 1983, and $995 by August. Sales did not recover. Losses, already higher than expected, continued to mount, and OCC declared bankruptcy on September 13, 1983. Story 9, Bob Chapek's takeover of Disney in 2019. He immediately hired finance buddies into creative positions, prioritized making money via their parks, and had a quantity over quality approach with their movies. He had a hand in green lighting an insane amount of projects, which lead to overworked staff, bad quality production, and as a result, disliked projects and failing entertainment properties, mainly Marvel. Creative industries are destroyed when one of two sets of people take over, marketing or finance. One doesn't know how to make a good product, the other doesn't care. Story 10, for a more serious example, there's the whole thing with the U.S. Firearms Company and the ZIP-22. The U.S. Firearms Company was a relatively small gun manufacturer. They were certainly never on the same scale as the likes of Colt or FN, but they were reasonably successful, and did find a niche for making what were, and still are, considered very high-quality reproductions of the Colt single-action army revolver. And then, for some inexplicable reason, the CEO decided to toss it all away in favor of his brainchild, the ZIP-22, a pistol that is generally considered to be one of the worst firearms ever made. Not only is it an extremely unreliable gun that's extremely prone to jamming, even if the thing works perfectly, the ZIP-22 is extremely awkward to hold from an ergonomics perspective. And on top of that, it's also one of the most blatantly unsafe firearms ever made, since cocking the gun requires the user to place their finger directly in front of the barrel. The ZIP-22 was such an absolute disaster of a firearm that just a year after it had been released, the company was forced to shut down in its entirety. Forgotten Weapons does a fairly in-depth video about all of its myriad issues in this video for anyone that wants to learn more about it. Story 11, not a CEO situation, but a district manager losing about 30 years worth of sales experience over a 1-month period. We worked at a cell phone store. We were in a great mall and were the best in the district. The worst location was in a perceivably better mall. The district manager decided that he was going to transfer the entire staff between the two malls, as if it wasn't the people that were the problem at the crappy location. Several of us objected to this move, and we were told, and I quote, "If I tell you to jump, you will say how high." One guy walked out on the spot, leaving with 5 years' experience. Within 3 days of the move, our best guy quit the company. 8 years of experience gone. A week later, I quit taking my 6 years of experience with me. About another week later, the last remaining guy and the manager both quit the same day for a total of 11 years more experience. Our original store predictably tanked and became the worst store. The Better Mall store remained empty for a few months. About 6 months after I passed my original store, it had closed down. I don't know if they relocated, but it was no longer there. It was one of those generic we sell every carrier company. Story 12, a CIO came in and started his tenure off with telling everyone his second week there on a Friday that starting Monday, there was absolutely no work from home. Nada. Zilch. No excuses. HR got involved and made it even clearer. This was before COVID and it was worth 3 days or a week. Some people had moved 2+ hours away, would come into town Monday morning, stay the night, work Tuesday, and go home to work until the next Monday. Well, in IT, it's not very prudent to not have your guys be able to hop on to fix a problem. So the CIO would try to make the exemption in special cases, and no one would budge. So the few times some people went in, a 10 million fix would run them 3 to 4 hours. This CIO also had a knack of yelling at people in public and just being a huge dummy and not knowledgeable about anything. He took a 15-year secretary and made her an enterprise backend developer that she never wanted. He took an amazing developer and assigned them to one of 58 sites for a pet project where we could start pulling data without the site's permission. The site told them to F off when they realized what was going on after a few months. The thinly spread developer led to a site getting hacked and held for ransom, literally. And that's just before I left. In 2 years, the place had a 50% plus turnover. The old timers who wrote the old code, keeping the place running, took early retirement. Middle careers like myself, everyone else was just new looking for experience or holding on for early retirement. The place cratered. From some colleagues who stayed, I heard people were often crying in the hallways. They had to hire a moral boosting position that did jack crap. Federal requirements were falling through left and right, and the agency was getting sanctioned repeatedly. Eventually, the board wiped out the entire top brass of about 10 people in a 200-person agency. But the damage was done, and to this day, crap still hasn't recovered. I know people who took 40,000 pay cuts for other jobs just to get out of that place. Story 13. The case of Sneaker Villa and the Manchurian COO. Any of you sneakerheads would know that Villa disappeared, but you may not know why. Our CEO was very cool, but a bit naive and had to let the investors have this stern school of business coup. The guy did nothing but make enemies. The Ferguson shootings had happened. Our company employees were very upset. We flew them all out to the Philadelphia Convention Center. Our CEO gives a conciliatory speech. Everyone claps. People are feeling better. The COO says, "Thanks, Jason. I just want everyone to know in this room that more white people are killed by the police each year than black people." I thought he was going to be killed. They found pictures of him having an affair. It got real racial real quick, and good partners wanted out. We were sold for 1/3 of what we should have been. I truly believe the COO was a Manchurian executive. The guy wiped out 200 million off the table. F you, Dave. Story 14. Not a CEO, but working in a small, female-dominated business. The new owner decided he was canceling the flexible contracts that allowed people to wiggle for school drop-off or kids' sick days and the like. The company had to shut for 2 weeks after the majority of the staff swapped to a competing business in the next suburb. The place never really picked up again after the word got around town. One of the ladies put in a good word for me a few months later, and an offer to sign a substantial pay increase and better conditions appeared in my inbox. Story 15, buy Twitter. Introduce payment for verification. Unban white supremacists and conspiracy theorists, causing a meteoric rise in white supremacists and conspiracy theorists. Remove the ability to block any of it, thus reducing the ability to curate one's feed and enabling stalking and harassment. Turn the company into a blatant propaganda rag for the CEO's personal agenda and ego, forcing himself and his views into every crack and orifice of the website, and making it infinitely more biased than he claims Twitter ever was. Call it X of all things. Say you want to make it an everything app. Meanwhile, 2+ years in, and it is still functionally just Twitter. Story 16, the new CEO was told to cut costs and commenced the most aggressive cost-cutting program ever seen in our company's history. So much so we started hemorrhaging revenue, which led him to cut costs even more aggressively. In the space of 2 years, we'd lost a heap of market share. We went from being a very profitable company to one with a sharp drop in ROE. And by the time he was fired for doing his business manager in his office, the business needed substantial investment to bring all its systems back up to standard and hire good staff again. Market share never recovered, and the business is still worse off than when he started a decade ago. Story 17, the CEO of Hoover decided on a ridiculous giveaway with the purchase of a new vacuum. They were giving away airline tickets worth more than the price of the vacuum. Everyone told him it was going to flop and cost the company millions more than the revenue it would bring in. He stuck to his guns, then tried to cancel the whole thing at the last minute. This was in 1992 in the UK, and if one spent 200 British pounds of Hoover stuff, they would get an airline ticket worth 600 pounds. Story 18, the company in the early 90s was a moderately successful manufacturer of network equipment for Macs. Not nearly as big as the dominant player in the market, but doing a respectable business and growing. CEO buys an HP 95 LX, an early personal information manager, or gets one for Christmas, and decides to pivot the company to write software to synchronize the calendar and contacts stored on this thing with the Mac. So he bet the company on a niche product for early adopters on the also ran, though admittedly superior, operating system. So a market size of maybe 1,000 consumers in 1991 and a price of like $99 a pop? Genius move. Last I heard, he fled to Hong Kong with the IRS on his tail. Story 19, not CEO, but president, and especially vice president of the company. Big motor. The president of the company placed his son as vice president, and profits skyrocketed, but only because, as it turned out, the new vice president forced dealerships to commit insurance fraud, regular fraud, abused and humiliated the staff, and killed all the plant life around the dealership. After it got out, the reputation of the company was completely destroyed, despite them being the biggest and most trusted dealership before that. Story 20 depends on what you mean by ruin. There's definitely a couple in history where the company was already in trouble and the CEO messed up. The CEO for DeLorean cars needed money and fell for a drug smuggling sting. Within minutes of agreeing to transfer drugs, the FBI arrests him LOL. The company was already in trouble as the factory was in Ireland, right in the middle of basically a war between Protestants and Catholics. Osborne, CEO of Osborne Computers, basically bragged so much about the next model coming out that no one bought the current model and the company declared bankruptcy. This is known as the Osborne effect, and companies try to avoid doing it. Story 21, not me, but a friend of mine is a corporate management wizard, to the point that he is hired to tell companies how to fix their crap. Most of his clients go bankrupt or get sold off for pennies within 2 years of his contract end because they either refuse to make the changes he lays out or they hire someone to run the company after making all the changes and their new management axes all of it for a lean system. Effectively, he recommends taking most of the profit margin and dividing it into employee retention, hiring, and reinvestment for equipment replacements slash upgrades slash facility improvements, expansion, and generally at a 50-50 ratio. But there are specifics as to how to maximize it, and that's where the wizard part comes in. Any and every company that actually followed his plan and stuck with it succeeded, which is why he is always in demand. The problem is most, and by most, I mean something like 80% of the companies don't. Cue one such company. The old man who had built the entire operation dies. Kids can't be arsed to run it because they have more important things to do. So they hire my friend to tell them how to turn it into an intaglio press. He goes through everything, spends something like 6 months on it, and gives them a detailed plan. Detailed down to who to hire to run it for them. They nod their empty heads and promptly hire one of their friends from high school to be CEO. The new CEO tells him his report is nonsense and tries to refuse the final payment for the contract they had with my friend. 4 months later, it was dissolved. Less than a year after that guy's death, the company he spent his life building did not exist. But my friend did get his last payment from the bankruptcy court. And the CEO got caught drunk with an underage cow at a DUI checkpoint shortly after. Story 22, and not nearly as high profile as a lot of what was posted here, but a couple of years back, I worked for a small single product manufacturer who were trying to get approval for it to be used as a medicine. 6 months into my contract, I was a contractor, this is outside the US. It was surprisingly bought out by a US based mid sized food manufacturer. We met our new owners, and one of them shook me by the hand, telling me how much we'd all be needed over the next years as they bought the product to market. The next day, they terminated my contract as non essential staff. On the one hand, I was a contractor, and crap like that can happen. One, the other, those guys a month before Christmas. 2 months later, the site was shut down with the loss of about 60 jobs. Why? Because the idiots had no idea of the regulatory process of bringing an API, active pharmaceutical product, to market. That was easily $200 million straight down the drain. Story 23, I worked for a luxury furniture e-commerce company that went through 3 CEOs in 4 years. The first two had a healthy respect and understanding of the role of forehead smack technology in an e-commerce business. The last one did not. I heard him multiple times saying, "Man, this tech makes the business so complicated. Remember when we could just write an order on paper and it would get done?" He went to the manufacturers of our furniture and cut corners in ways that reduced the quality. Then he laid off 75% of the US staff and contracted the customer service to Colombia for a quarter of the cost. Shipping times tripled. Damage on delivery skyrocketed. I tried explaining that we needed to maintain our investment in tech to grow, but that was seen as dissent, and I eventually was let go. The company went from doing $6 million a month in revenue to less than $1 million. Black Friday or Cyber. Monday, my first year there, we did almost $8 million in revenue. BFCM 24, they made $760,000. I suspect they'll shutter within a year. Story 24, you could argue Elon Musk and Tesla. In order to justify its $1 trillion valuation, he has to keep so many plates spinning in future growth perception that it's in danger of collapse if nothing comes to fruition. From full self-driving to robo-taxis to automatic car sharing, Cybertruck and Tesla Semi, he keeps promising disruptive technology but has yet to deliver. Once enough people doubt the company, then it will come crashing down. Tesla has done some amazing things and has created an EV market in the US, but its valuation is not realistic. Story 25 decided that owning a live music venue would be more exciting than a fastener company. That's not how he presented it, however. He was going to move them to just-in-time manufacturing to reduce their reliance on expensive warehousing. The fact that the company warehouse was going to be redeveloped into a state-of-the-art music experience was just his way of giving back to the community. Labor costs doubled, and the sales department went from, "You can have them this afternoon if you send someone over, otherwise we'll deliver in the morning," to, "Sorry, it'll be 30 days, and there's a minimum order of 50,000. They went bankrupt within 9 months. Karmic justice was sweet, though. His first partner in the music venue fled the country with a pile of stolen cash from investors. When he submitted for planning permission, the NIMBYs came out of the woodwork, and his second partner put the nails in the coffin when he decided to go ahead and spruce the place up and do a soft open by tearing out a crap ton of asbestos and holding an illegal rave where 2 kids overdosed.